everybody, my name's Kate and I'm going to be showing you how I drew this poster. It is inspired by Dungeons & Dragons and I drew it in Photoshop, and you can buy this as posters in my Etsy shop. The link is in the description below. It's also available in my other online shops like Redbubble, Society6. Links are in the description, and you can buy it on like t-shirts and all sorts of bits and bobs like that. So you can go crazy. You can have it on whatever you want, like a pencil case or like a skirt, even leggings, I think. So yeah, I'm going to show you how I drew this in Photoshop. There's quite a lot of footage and it might go a little bit fast at times, but I will try and explain it as I go along, and I hope you enjoy it. We're going to jump straight in with the sketch. Now you can see I've already done the background and the text. The text was very simple, it was just a font and I beveled and embossed it. I also had to adjust it to fit the dice in the middle, and then I just put some overlays with some brushes just to like muddy it up a little bit and give it some texture, because I didn't want it to look really flat. I wanted it to look a little bit medieval and a little bit darker. Now with the sketches, I did them each on a separate layer so that I could move the bottles about and decide where I wanted them. And then I was going to do some vines on it, as you can see here, but in the end I decided against it. To be honest, it was just a little bit overwhelming. And I didn't actually think I'd be able to do it justice and make it look exactly how I wanted it, so I didn't do the vines in the end. I mean, you will actually see later on that I do some other vines around the edge, but again, I don't use them in the final piece. So drawing these potion bottles, that took the most amount of time in this, and I guess it was over about 2 months, and I think I've got between like 20 or 30 hours worth of footage. I actually only used one brush for the entire piece, at least I'm pretty sure I did. I know that I used one brush when drawing the actual glass bottles. I may have used something different, like when I'm colouring in them I used the pen tool to make a selection and then just coloured in using a gradient and then adding highlights and shades and stuff, but I know that for the most part with the drawing I just used the one brush, and I'm so sorry but I don't know where I got it from. It was a free downloadable brush that I got from somewhere and I haven't been able to find it since, so I'm really sorry about that, but I just don't know where it come from. And the reason I like it so much is because when you draw with it, it builds up the colour really sort of softly, and it doesn't make any harsh lines. Even though it does have a little bit of a texture, it's really good for getting a nice gradient for highlights and shadows, so that's why I really like it. And as you scale up the brush, the texture also scales up, so you can get quite a range of different features from just this one brush. But if you are looking for some brushes to use in Photoshop, I'm using Photoshop CC, so it does come with Kyle T. Webster's brushes. If you just Google how to add them in, honestly do it. I cannot recommend them enough. I actually bought them long before that they were included in Adobe Photoshop, and I'm so glad that I did. There are so many options. They are really good and I definitely recommend installing them. And as you can see, after I did a few bottles, I went back to the first one and fixed it up a little bit. I kind of, got into my stride with drawing glass bottles, and to be honest, these guys took me ages to draw. Like, I kept putting it off because it was just so tedious, and I am happy with how they turned out, but that was a hell of a long slog. Colouring in the glass bottles was one of my favourite parts because it really sort of brought the piece together. I had an idea of what colours I wanted to use, but I didn't really know where I wanted to put them. I know I wanted Dexterity to be purple, but I asked my Dungeons & Dragons group to help me figure out where to put the other colours. If you're not familiar with Dungeons & Dragons, the little glass potion bottles, they're supposed to represent the ability scores. So you've got Dexterity, Constitution, Charisma, Strength, Intelligence and Wisdom. I was actually going to use red for Strength instead of pink, just because I often think of Strength relating to like a lion or a big cat or a tiger or something, so I always think like reds and oranges for that, but I also wanted to use the orange for Charisma because I thought it was quite a nice bright colour. So in the end I just went for pink with the Strength. And the reason why I didn't use red is because I used red for the dice in the front and the dice in the middle of the text at the top. So that's why I excluded the red, even though red is my favourite colour. When I coloured in the green and yellow bottle, you can see that I made a slight mistake in the way that I drew it. In order to get the colour to look like it's inside the bottle, you need to place that artwork on a layer below the layer that contains the glass bottle artwork. And what I did was, on the glass bottle layer, I put the highlight in the back of the glass on that same layer, which is the wrong place for it really. That really needed to be below the colour layer. So in the end, I think I ended up removing it, but it's something that you need to think about when using Photoshop. If you've got something that's sort of in a 3D space and you want something to be in front of it, you need to make sure that you set your layers up correctly. And it's always a good idea to draw something in its entirety, even if it's going to be covered up by something else, because then you'll have the freedom to move it around and adjust your layout a little bit more. Whereas if you're drawing a flat piece and you've got something behind something else and then you want to move it, well then it just makes it more difficult because you're missing part of the artwork. If I was to draw these bottles all flat on the one layer, I wouldn't have been able to move them around, and I don't know if you can see it in the footage here, but I did actually move them around, even if just shifting them a few millimeters. And I can also repurpose them and use them for other artwork and stuff, because I'm thinking of using the bottles to do separately, maybe make some stickers or something. So if I had them all on the one layer, I wouldn't have been able to do that. So there's two things to keep in mind. Just make sure that you get your layers organised in the right way, and also make sure that you draw objects in their entirety if you're building up your piece. I mean, you don't have to, you can draw them any way you want. It's just something I would recommend because I know that it really helps me in the way I draw. And I do hope I don't ever have to draw glass bottles again. Now, as you can see, drawing this piece, I do an ivy vine around it. And when I actually drew it, I was a little bit messy with it because I was just sort of testing it out, see if I could actually do it. And I didn't really have an idea of how I wanted to texture it or colour it in, so I was kind of experimenting. But in the end, it turned out a lot better than I thought. But overall, although I was really happy with how it looked, I don't think it worked with this piece because it was a little bit too busy. So I do eventually remove it from the poster, but I am really pleased that I did do it because it came out much better than I thought. For the ivy leaves, I didn't actually want to draw them individually myself. I had a brush texture which would stamp out an ivy leaf with all the textures of a leaf in it already. So I used that and I did different sort of varying sizes, and then I altered them by moving them around and squashing them and folding them and just making it look like they were, you know, less static and they were actually different leaves rather than the one stamp. And I'm quite happy with how it turned out. I added a little bit of shadows and highlights afterwards and then joined them up to the ivy vine, and I did spend quite a few hours on this, so at the end I was a little bit annoyed with myself that I didn't end up using it. But going on from that, I did actually then use it for another poster design that I come up with. Because I finished this poster a week before the London MCM Comic Con in October, I had a little tiny bit of time to do a few more posters, and I really wanted to use that ivy vine because I spent so much time drawing it. Now just a quick note on the labels. As you can see, I did start doing the labels with a chain around the Charisma one. I wanted it to be really quite elegant to match with the bottle, but in the end I did decide to just make all the labels the same, obviously a different shape, but I used the same font, and without even knowing it, that's the same font as the words level up at the top, so I'm quite happy with how that actually matched up. And for the dexterity one, I wanted to have it look like it was wrapped around the bottle with a little rope, and I used a rope brush from, I think it was in Illustrator, and then I just brought it into Photoshop and just layered some shadows and highlights on it, and I think it turned out quite well. To draw the dice, I wasn't actually all that confident that I could draw the angles quite accurately, so what I did was I laid out my own dice and I took a photo of them and then imported that into Photoshop so that I could trace them, and then I used the reference photos also to get the shading right, and I just again used that same brush that I've used the whole way through just to build up the shading, because although my dice didn't look too bad as a photograph, I wanted this to be all hand drawn, so I didn't want to use the photograph of my real dice for this. Also my dice are transparent, whereas I wanted these ones to be opaque. And obviously for the text, for the numbers, I just you know, wrote them out and then transformed them into the right angles and stuff. That wasn't too difficult, it just took a little bit of playing around, and in the end I'm actually quite surprised at how well the dice came out. And the main idea that I had with this piece was to have these sitting on a table. So for the table I just did a brown round circle, and then I overlaid a piece of wood just so I could get the texture, and then I added some more wood textures using some brushes and stuff, and you know, added some shadows and highlights, and it came out quite well. I think it turned out good. And thankfully the poster came out better than I had imagined in my head, so that is always a plus when you're drawing something, because most of the time when I'm drawing, nothing matches the way I want it to, so I'm pretty happy with how this turned out. And as you can see, here are the other posters that I came up with. I also did some D20 and Natural 1 posters as well as doing the red version with the F word. I also thought it might be an idea to tone them down a bit and have a bit of a neutral version. And obviously the red ones were the most popular at the Comic-Con. So I think the level up poster with the potion bottles is my favourite, and I'm thinking of making some other things with it. I've got some notebooks on the way, so keep an eye out for those. Do follow me on Instagram and Twitter. I will have details of any new items that come out with that design on it, and like I said before, you can get it on all sorts of things in my shops. But thank you for watching this speed paint, and here comes the outro. Thank you so much for watching. As I said, these posters are available in my Etsy shop, and you can also buy them in my other online shops, which are linked in the description below. I also sell them at conventions, so follow me on Instagram and Twitter. I will update there. Please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. I really appreciate it, and I will see you in my next video.